Welcome in, everybody. My name is Diomedes of Diomedes Industries, and today we are going to be doing a bit of a live stream, but also will work as a recording for how to make the dice pattern that you have dice bag pattern that you just downloaded from a website. So we're going to get started right away. We're going to do this as quick as possible and show you guys what I'm up to and how to do this sort of thing on your own leisure. Let me turn that on so I got a little good light. All right, let's get started. You should already have this pattern in hand. You should download it and you should print it off. You should set your printer, however, to 100%. So print to 100% on your printer. If you're having trouble getting this the right size, then you're going to be struggling with, usually with printing that to 100%. So don't do the fit to page or anything like that. 100%. When you get that done, print it off. It should have a couple of pages, at least as far as just the pattern goes. And you can set this up and double check that your scale is working correctly. So I've got 2 inches on this scale, and that means that this printed off correctly. So when you get that done, you're going to line up the A's here and tape this together. That's going to give you a pattern that crosses over a couple of pieces of paper. Okay? Print that off and then get it to a cutting surface that's safe. And then I use a ruler that has a cork back, and I then use that to cut straight lines on my pattern. I've got most of these lines already cut, as you can see. We're going to cut this other pattern here. So as we're making this, you're going to see I've got some ways of skipping over some things so that we can go a little faster in this. But you're going to have your pattern then cut out, and you can get rid of this part here. And this is going to allow you to trace it onto your leather. Okay? Now, there's a couple of ways of doing this. You can use a scratch awl. I recommend a scratch awl in the pattern pack. And I'm going to use one today for some of this, but also you can use a fabric pen. So if you've got a fabric pen that is erasable, that works too. So just know that it is a little bit difficult sometimes if you don't cut the line off to get rid of what is on there. So what we're going to do then is we're going to mark out our pattern on here. Then we're going to use our scratch awl because it's just easier to hit the holes here to be able to punch these holes out. All right, so let's get started. What I like to do is set up my edges. I'm using 4-ounce leather here. 3 to 4 works. Chrome tan is best. Whatever color you like the most is what really matters here. What we're making in the end result is this dice bag right here. Okay, so it holds about 85 dice. Depending on how big those dice are. I've got some custom dice in here that I have that I've been using on stream. Got a couple of other D6s here. These are custom special D6s from Sirico Creations, friend of the stream. But what we've got then is this dice bag being made. The reason I like it is it stands on its own and allows you to get into your dice bag and pull whatever dice you need out easily and put them back in. So if you enjoy this is exactly what we're going to be building here. So back to it. 3 to 4 ounce leather. This is buffalo that I'm using here. But again, use whatever you like the most. And I'm just marking out quickly where these all go. And we'll go back and we'll mark the holes here in just a second. And then we're going to grab our cutting board. I've got just a small piece of cutting board here. I've got other cut tables and stuff, but I want to try to make this for anybody who wants to build it so that it makes sense. We lay out our ruler here. I'm using just a hobby knife to keep it keep it sharp. Whatever you're using, just use whatever is comfortable to you and something that is sharp so that you can be safe when you're making cuts. We're going to go all the way around our pattern first, just getting the 4 outside corners cut. I like to mark just the edges because then I don't worry about my pen making a mess. If you are worried about that sort of thing, though, use your scratch awl, and that will make a mark just as well. So let's see this. If you got this here and use your scratch awl, you can see how you can clearly see that line. So that's not going to be a problem for you to make a cut based on that. I missed one of my marks here, so I'll be putting that line in. I've done enough of these. I think I should be okay, but we'll see. Making these cuts on the bottom. And these little windows come right out. Yeah, it looks like I got it right. It's almost like I've done this before. Okay. If you get this pattern pack and you see that I'm streaming, I'm on Twitch. Definitely come over, and if you got any questions, I'll be more than happy to help you. I stream a couple times a week, sometimes on surprise times. But what we've got now is we're making the holes here so that we can punch those out with 1/8 inch hole punch. I get the 1/8 inch hole punch from Tandy. So there's a list of what you need on the pattern pack, but definitely get, a 1/8 inch pattern or a 1/8 inch punch at some point. Some people use ones that have little squeeze handles. Use whatever works for you. And then take your punch and set these holes here. And so the way I do it is I set my hole punch down first, okay? And it makes a little circle right here. And then I can see whether that is centered on the dot that I just made, okay? So we're going to go down this line and mark all 10 holes. I believe there's 10 holes that we need for this project. Our next step is to skive our lines around the edges so that we have something that is nice to fold when we get done. That's all we need from the hole punch. Those have been made. Pay attention to the holes that you use. I use 1/8 inch holes so that I can use the eyelets that I recommend in the pattern pack. I get those from Tandy. These actually I got from Ohio Travel Bag, and I've got some recommendations in the pattern pack that you can use for your eyelets. So we will be installing those in just a minute, but just keep an eye to make sure that your eyelets fit the holes that you need, and also the shank is long enough to go through and seal on the back side. So I'll show you how that works in just a minute. The next thing that we're going to do, once we have the eyelets punched, is to skive the top of and the sides of our project. So what I recommend in the pattern pack that you've downloaded is a safety skiver from Tandy. Now, you can use other things like a skiving knife and things like this. I'll be showing the safety skiver because people who use a skiving knife, it takes a little bit of practice to be able to set up a good, clean skive, okay? And usually people sort of struggle with just using a skiving knife. So, let me show you how to do the safety skiver. I've already set this up on my skiving machine, so 3 sides are already done. A little bit of cheating there. But what we're going to do is we're going to take down the 4-ounce leather to about half of what is currently there, so about 2 ounce. And most people who are newer to the hobby don't have a way of measuring ounces. These scales can sometimes be expensive. But what we're really talking about here is that you've got about a 1.5 mil as your thickness to start with, and you're going to bring that down to just under about a mil. And that allows you to bend this fold over that we're going to make that really makes the project look professional when it's done. That allows that fold over to look good. So what you can see on this one that I've already made is it lays flat once this rollover has been set. I lost a couple dice. I'm going to put them back in the dice bag here. Okay, I'll keep that right here. So we're going to bring this down, and we're going to bring this down about a 1/2 inch back. This skive is a little bit long, and that's okay for what I'm doing, but we're going to take that about a 1/2 inch back. If you're wondering what 1/2 inch, and you don't want to set it with a ruler, you can just grab a wing dividers. You can get these from Amazon, anywhere, and then set carefully your 1/2 inch line, and then you know where to bring your skive back, okay? And you know where to bring your skive back to. So again, we're going to bring that back about a 1/2 inch. This blade is not as sharp as it could be. I don't mind that when I'm doing a little bit of work because I've been doing it for a while. But definitely practice on scrap before you ruin a decent little sized panel. That's going to be about right. That's going to allow me to fold that over neatly. Okay? So, the next step is to fold this over and stitch a line. That's going to be the line that we stitch for the closure, okay, for the opening. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use 1/8 inch 2-sided tape. This is not necessary. I just find it a lot easier than gluing with contact cement or leathercraft cement what we're about to glue here 1/2 inch back, okay? So definitely use what you're comfortable with. Glue will certainly work, but because we're stitching this right on this line, the 2-sided tape works well and works fast. So that's what we've got tonight that we're going to use. And then we're going to fold this over right at about a 1/4 inch, making the full fold 1/2 inch. Being careful to keep everything straight and even. Okay? I'm going to use a cobbler's hammer. Any smooth-faced hammer will do. This is a cobbler's hammer. You don't have to use a hammer, however. You can use a couple of different things. This is a roller from Tandy. That works just fine to get that to seal over. This is a pair of crimpers that you might want a leather line. This one's, I got these very cheap from Amazon. And you can then use those to crimp everything over as well. Be careful when you use crimpers. You might want to leather line those because that can leave a mark on your leather. So, however you get there, we get there. and you've got your 1/2 inch fold over done. Okay, so we're moving right along. What we're going to do next is we're going to set our wing divider. I just have a little baby set of wing dividers. You don't need these. You can use a ruler, you can use whatever, but we're going to set that at half of this length, a little over half, to make sure that we get a good stitch all the way down. And if you want to test that, you can run it down and go, okay, that's where my stitch is going to end up. Everything's going to be good to go there. Okay? So I run this down like this. That sets our stitch line, and now we know where our stitch line is going to end up. The next thing you're going to need is some way of sewing this. I'm going to get us started on hand stitching and show you how I do it, but please don't take this as a hand stitching class. All right, you can use a sewing machine, you can use any method you want to do to hold these together, but hand stitching is what most of us have access to, so that's what I'll be using here. Okay, I'm going to use an inexpensive set of 4mm stitching prongs, and we're going to be using a 1/38 thread. All right, now use your preferred method. Use what you think looks best and works best. This is actually 69 thread, very thin thread, on a sewing machine. 1/38 thread is a little thinner than some people use. I've seen this with 4mm irons and Ritza 1mm thread. Use what works for you, okay? So we're gonna set these on our poundo mat here. You don't need a poundo mat. You can just use another piece of leather, scrap underneath. Just make sure your prongs are not going all the way through into your hard surface in the background, because that's going to bend, dull, and do bad things to the prongs on this, okay? So we quickly set those in using the previous one prong where we just made our mark all the way down, making sure they go all the way through. You can use a speedy awl, you can use pricking irons and not stitching irons. Just use what works for you. If you have any questions, my email is in the pattern pack, and you can email me, and I can tell you any whatever information that you might want for this project. So that quickly sets our holes, okay? Now we're going to sew up these holes. I'm not going to sew them all. What I'm going to show you is how to get started. I'm not going to belabor the process too much, and then we'll skip to one that's already been sewn. But before we stitch these up, what I want to do is set my eyelets, okay? Set my eyelets, and I've got one set here, so you can see what it looks like before and after. I'm using black eyelets on this project. You can use any color eyelet you want. Sometimes they call them grommets. This is an eyelet. So we're going to set in, we're going to throw that one. We're going to set in our eyelets on our pattern here. And then we're going to set these with whatever method we've got that makes sense to you. I have a press that I use for mine, but I will show you both using the press and using the hand tools. So if you get these from something like a Tandy Leather or whatever, get the hand tool that corresponds, that allows you to set these eyelets, okay? I'll show you both ways of doing this. So when you get all your eyelets put in, you're going to get this little anvil that comes with the tool that I've got here. Yours won't have this little thing on it. I had modified mine to fit in an arbor press. So what you're going to do then is you're going to set the eyelet upside down on the anvil, and you're going to use your maul to tap that eyelet down, which secures it to the project. It rolls that over and sets that permanently. Now, the faster way of doing this is to use a press, but it's also a more expensive way. So if you're just making a couple of these, you know, by all means, use the hand project or use the hand tools. If you're making a whole bunch of them, then get you a nice little press because you can see how fast they work. Okay? That comes with a little peg that these sit on. And then you just need to go through the process and set these all up. You don't need the eyelets, by the way. If you don't have eyelets and you don't want to set these and you're just trying to get something to the table quickly, I used to make these for a long time without eyelets. I think the eyelets look more professional. I think they also prevent tear out. Although I've never had quality leather tear out in this method. So use what you think works, and if you like the more rustic look, then by all means, leave your project without the eyelets put on. If you want something that looks a little bit more like steampunky and stuff, look at some of the burnished brass ones. You can always modify this and change this to fit what you want it to be. Now, we're going to grab a couple of needles here. I'm using John James needles 001s with this 138 thread that I've waxed already. You're going to want to use some version of waxed thread. Have I waxed this? Yes. If you haven't, take a cake, small cake of wax. I use beeswax, and just run it through by putting your thumb on top of it a couple of times, and that will get you enough wax on the project that it helps the thread stay where you put it while you're stitching up your project. Now, we're going to use a double needle saddler's method, okay? So what we want to do is have a needle on each end of the thread. So what I just did is I threaded the needle and then I pierced the thread once, okay? And that pierce holds that needle on for the most part. Sometimes you might need to double pierce it. Holds that needle on the end. So again, we're just piercing our needle here. So you can see I just pierced the needle and then we just thread that on all the way through, and that just keeps it in place. Okay? Now you can do this next part by hand. I use a stitching pony that I just sit on. It allows me to get another set of hands. So you can see the stitching pony here, sits in my lap. I made this one, but you can get these from a lot of places. Tandy sells them. Again, you don't need it. Just makes things easier if you do a lot of these, okay? Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna start one hole in from the end. So second from the end, right? We're gonna thread our needle through there and we're gonna pull it taut, all right? Pulling it maximally up here so we've got a full length, and it's now halfway on each needle. And we're going to back stitch one thread. Just go back one, put one needle through, and then the other needle through the other way. All right? So one needle through, the other needle through the other way, giving us one full stitch on our project. Okay? So that's one hole in, one back stitch. Then that is all we need, and we can start going forward. Now, hand stitching has a lot of nuance to it. So I would practice. I would also look up hand stitching guides on YouTube. Armitage Leather has been known for many hand stitching guides. J&L Leather has a great one, and many others. But for this project, what I'm doing is hand stitching this using a left hand strong method. I'm putting my left hand needle through. I'm grabbing that needle, I'm capturing that needle in sort of a cross pattern. Okay. I go on top, inserting the other needle back through and folding up the thread on top of that. Let me show you what I mean again. Left hand through, right hand on top, grabs the whole package here with a sort of a cross. The right hand needle now goes behind this thread, and then I use a single overcast with this side. So let me show you that a couple more times. Left hand right on top, going through, overcast over here. I dropped my needle though. Let me fix it. There we go. Let me fix this. Okay, let's try it one more time. Left hand through. Right hand on top, right hand through, and so on. Left hand through, right hand on top. Inserting the right hand needle behind the left hand thread. And a single overcast on top. Now let me just do that as I'm talking to you here for another inch maybe, and I'll show you what that looks like when we get it done. You get a certain stride that you hit with your hand stitching. So just play around with the look and feel of the thread inside of the holes that you're setting up. The thickness of the thread, whether you're using your right hand first or your left hand first, whether you're capturing it with the needle on top or the needle on the bottom, each one of those changes the look just a little bit, and it allows you to make some changes, get better at your craft, and do that. But what we end up with is a stitch that looks like that. You can see how it sort of staggers as it moves on. That's because the lines that I've put in there, those holes that I've put in there, are on an angle. See how those are all on an angle? So what we end up doing is with one of the stitches it rides on top, then its bottom, the other hand stitch rides on the bottom. That means those threads are passing each other. It means if you tear a thread out, it tears on an angle. It doesn't tear into the next hole. It doesn't tear into the next hole of your project. It doesn't zipper out. You might just have one tear. Now, I've never had this tear on a dice bag, but that's why we do it that way. Let's assume that we've sewn all the way down to the other end. What we'll then do is, just like we did at the very beginning, we're going to do a back stitch. In this case, we're going to do a back stitch and a half. And what you want to do is you want to end up with the needle that's on the outside pulled through where both of your threads are on the back. You cut that off, you burn the ends with a lighter, and you have a finished stitch. However you got there, we have now sewn the top. Okay? So what we should have is a project that looks like this. Okay? We've stitched this all the way down. We ended with, see that double back stitch there? We ended with a back stitch here. That solidifies that and keeps everything from unraveling and being all set. Again, I'm going to assume that you know how to stitch and that what I've done so far is just review. But the next step, for now, until the very end of the project, we end up dealing with this piece of leather inside out. We will deal with it inside out. Okay? So, the next stitch is the longitudinal stitch down here. Notice that I've skived this already so that this stitch, when it is stitched here on the back side, this is our back side stitch, will lay a bit flatter than it would have if we were full thickness 4 ounce on 4 ounce leather. Okay? Now, what I used to do is I used to use my double-sided tape and tape up this edge to hold it together. I don't do that anymore because when we get it all the way done, we end up putting a bit of pressure on here, and you see how it exposes the stitch inside. You know, it's nothing to see, not any problem. But what I found is it also exposed a little bit of that adhesive, and that's not what I wanted. So what you can do is use any form of clip to hold this shut. Binder clips work really well, sewing clips work really well, paper clips in this case, because it's inside out, you're not marring any leather, would work just fine. What you do then is put these back to back, clip them together, or before clipping it together, use your wing dividers and set a stitch line all the way down. When that's done then, clip together, stitch down, taking the clips out as you go along, right? Stitch from the bottom to the top or the top to the bottom. I tend to do bottom to the top, and here's why. I set a single back stitch here, and then what I end up doing up here is I wrap the top with a couple of stitches just to give it a little more security at that opening, and then I set a couple of back stitches here. So what does that look like when it's done? Well, here's what the finished project looks like. You can see I've wrapped the top with the thread, and then I went a couple of back stitches down. You can see it here on what we would look like on the project. The next step in the project is that it would look like this. So right now, what we've done thus far, we've cut our pattern out, we've skived all the way around our edges, we've rolled the top, we've stitched the top, we set the sides together, and we stitched the sides. Back stitching right there where that pressure is placed when you put your hand in the bag to get your favorite D2 out. Apparently I do have a D2. Skull or flower or heart, I mean. What do you think? Make your call now. It's a heart. Yay. So, the next step can be a little confusing, but this is what it's going to look like so far. I put a little sticky tape on here to remind myself of what I needed to talk about next. But right now what we've got is your project looks like this. So what's the next step? The next step is to fold this in half this way. And that's why the pattern looks the way the pattern looks. It's got, if you remember, it's got those cutouts there. All right? So again, we're going to set our bottom up. Now we've got this part sewn already. We're going to take our wing dividers. We're going to set our 1/8 inch seam allowance or seam line here, okay? We're going to clip it down and we're going to sew it shut as well. All right? So that's our next step. Remember, we started like this. We go like this. We make sure that those are even. And then we sew along the bottom. What does that get us? That gets us to this look, all right? Where we have that, okay? So now your project looks like this. Remember, we've skived all the way around. We've done that, rolled the top and stitched the top. We put the sides together, we stitched the sides. We put the bottom together, we stitched the bottom. And as you can see, we even rolled over those edges to make sure that's secure. So that when we have the bottom of this bag, right? Let me cinch it shut so my dice don't go pouring out. The bottom of this bag has a good strong stitch along the bottom. But what we don't have yet is it fully sewn. We need these 2 stitches to be completed. So, what do we got? How do we do this? It's easier than you think, and here's how we're going to do it. We take it, we turn it upright like this, and we just sort of fold it like that. Putting these little mouths together. Okay, so it once was like this. We're going to go like that. We're going to set this up. We're going to fold that out of the way. We're going to make our stitch line here. And we're going to sew that up. Let me go through that again. So we've got this here currently. Everything's stitched the way we had it in that step. We're going to set it on its head, on the opening, right? We're going to sort of push down on the center here And we're going to get these sort of puckered out, our two little mouths with little lips, and we're going to sew their little lips shut. It sounded worse than I wanted it to, but here we are. So we're going to sew those up one at a time, all right? One at a time. Okay. So we've got that sewn up, and what does that look like? Well, what that looks like is this. We've sewn everything up, and now we have a completed project as far as the sewing is concerned, but it's inside out, okay? It's inside out. So we want it to look like this. We want it to look like this. It now currently looks like this. So all we have to do is turn it right side out. That takes a little bit of muscle, but it's not bad. Don't hesitate. If you've sewn everything well, you can give it a poke and a prod, and it's gonna fold the correct way, and you're gonna end up with a dice bag when you're done. Now, what you're gonna wanna do is when you get it out to the bottom, you're gonna wanna make sure you fold out these bottom pieces all the way. Or if you get them kind of like this, it doesn't stand right, it doesn't look right. So feel free to poke out those bottoms, okay? If you're struggling a little bit, like if you use thicker leather, what I find is a dowel or the tail end of a hammer handle, you can push on this and sort of mold that out the way you need it to. Again, I'm using 4-ounce buffalo, so this works pretty well. So again, we are now here in our project. All we have to do now is put the lace on it. You can use any lace you want, okay? I'm using 4mm cotton waxed lace that I get from Fireball Mountain. It's a beading shop. But if you want the leather look, by all means, make yourself some lace. Get about 1/4 inch. This, like I said, is 4mm. But if you had 1/4 inch or a little bit less, that's going to work really, really well for your project. Now, this can be a little confusing to people, so let me show you how to lace this efficiently. You want to lay this out so the front looks like this. The back has the seam, okay? So set the back seam in between the center two eyelets. Then simply start with one of the eyelets and start feeding your line through. So then, let me show you what that looks like. So there's your back seam, right? There's your back seam. And now you've got a start here. You're going to leave some line. I leave it usually just a little bit past the bottom. And how much line do you need? That's a really good question. I use about 24 inches of line because you can always cut it off and this isn't too expensive. Again, if you like the leather look, cut yourself your own lace. If you like paracord, use paracord. But we're just going to quickly feed this through, okay? Because this is flat thread, flat cord, I try to make sure that these flat lines stay, they don't get flipped on the inside or the outside, or that can kind of look a little bit amateurish. So run this all the way around. The pattern pack makes it so that the eyelets on the back are the same spacing once sewed with the proper seam allowance, also mentioned in the pattern pack. Don't worry if that gets a little frayed. We're going to cut that off anyway, this part that we're just putting through. Now, I add a bead to the end. You can do whatever you want. You saw that shield bead that I had before. That's just something that I order. It does add some expense to it, so feel free to do whatever you want to do on that. But I want to make sure that I finish this up. Let me straighten that out. And I want my lines to hang down and look nice. I got a little extra here, but I knew I was going to fray this end, so I didn't worry about it too much. What I've used is a deer antler tip, cut off, sanded down, smooth, and then I just drilled a hole in it. That's another way. I did this for years, just doing deer antlers. And it looks great. I like it because you can add a little bit of leather dye to the deer antlers, and it kind of looks like dragon's teeth. I used to make necklaces out of those too, and you can do you can take different colored dyes on your deer antler and do different colors for like different types of dragons, chromatic dragons, whatever. I sold a lot of those necklaces back in the day. I don't do that so much anymore. Mostly just doing leather. So now we've got both of our things laid out. And we quickly trim that off on a little bit of an angle to make it look sort of finished. And there is our dice bag. So that when we close that, all of these sort of lay on top of each other. And we end up with our closure that holds everything closed, and we end up with dice in our dice bag. So that's about 45 minutes from start to end. Sewing will take you a little bit longer, but not much more. And you now have made your first dice bag. Congratulations. I hope that this helped you out. My email address is diamedesindustries@gmail.com. Please email me if you've got any questions, and I'll help you out. Thanks for buying the pattern pack, and I will see you on the next pattern pack. Peace.